What's good with everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Gifted Hoops podcast. I'm pretty sure, y'all, this is episode 25. Y'all know me, almost every week I mess up the count, but it should be 25. And I'm joined today by a passionate Toronto Raptors fan. She works on a lot of content that's covering the team. Iman, feel free to introduce yourself to the people.
Thank you so much for having me. I cover the Raptors for predominantly Yahoo Sports Canada, and also started up a Substack this year called Pros and Claws, where we'll be covering the NBA at large, but a specific focus on the Toronto Raptors.
Cool. All of those links will be in the description, so make sure to tap in and support Iman in that. Also, make sure to tap into this episode on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and also YouTube for the video version where you can see our lovely faces as we go through the Toronto Raptors. Now, getting right into this conversation, I think should be pretty interesting. We're going to start in the 2022 offseason after the playoffs headed into 2023. Can you take me through your thoughts of the team for that current construction?
Yeah, so heading into 2023.
Yes.
Heading into last season, honestly, vibes were pretty high. You're coming off of a Rookie of the Year campaign or win for Scotty Barnes. And the team, I think, exceeded a lot of expectations. They finished 5th in the Eastern Conference after really starting off pretty slow. And, they lost in the first round, but it looked like a lopsided series, especially for the first half of it, but really wasn't throughout the second half. And I think there was a lot of things that Raptor fans looked at, and I know that the Raptors team looked at and saw that they could carry over into the following season. Even in that playoff series, you're dealing with Gary Trent, Scotty Barnes, and Fred VanVleet all being hurt or sick. So they're really looking at, hey, we had 3 of our top 6 guys either hurt or sick throughout that entire first round series, and it still goes down to 6 games with traffic, with a real heartbreaker of a loss in game 3. So you're really like, could have definitely pushed that to game 7. The game 3 loss that the Raptors had in the playoffs, at least they led for the entirety of of regulation and only lost that lead in overtime with Joel Embiid hitting the most improbable shot of his career. And it was great to watch. Hey, superstars do what superstars do, right? So I think the vibes heading into the 2023 season were incredibly high. You're looking at this team that is oddly built and shouldn't make sense on paper, but they made it work, especially towards the latter half of that season. And you're thinking there's no reason that you can't carry that into 2023, only to find out there are tons of reasons why you couldn't just bottle that up and carry it into 2023. That was the vibes in the offseason.
I think that's a perfect way to describe the team. I mean, Pascal took another leap. I feel like every year as an athlete, he just continues to get better and better. And specifically, Scotty Barnes had a very good season considering how many roles he had to play for the team. So his potential in terms of becoming a good NBA star, it looked there. Also during the offseason, you saw a bunch of videos from the entire Toronto Raptors team basically playing pickup basketball and just working on things together. So coming in, I looked at this Raptors team and I said they went that far with a team where they had many people in that series go down to injury with Joel Embiid. And again, I mean, that Joel Embiid shot, if he doesn't hit it, you're talking about another overtime period where things are going down for the team and you're questioning, can they take this game? So incredible playoff series considering those circumstances.
That shot, I want to say, that shot was the first moment they led. One of the craziest shots we'll ever see. And, maybe Philadelphia owes it to Toronto to hit a crazy shot in the playoffs. It's only fair. But it was the first lead that they took the entire game. And we're talking with seconds to go in overtime. So, Raptor fans definitely leaning 3. Thinking, Yeah.
I think for this Raptors team coming in, I had to basically predict where they would fall in the conference. I felt like the Raptors had the framework of a team that was a playoff team. I mean, so much length and size at every position. And I did believe in the coaching staff as well to be able to maximize these players. I looked at Scotty Barnes as a player that, again, played many different roles for this team. So I thought coming in, he would be more, developed in terms of the point guard position and being able to do a lot of different things. From your perspective, where did you have the Raptors seeding wise before the season began?
I had them pretty high. I honestly did. I thought the same thing with Scotty Barnes. I knew that we were going to see him try his hand a little bit more at the point guard duties, right? We knew that that was sort of the shift that the team wanted. I wasn't necessarily totally on board for that, but I still thought everything should be fine. You're having Pascal Siakam just having, career year after career year. Fred VanVleet coming off of a career year as well. I didn't see any reason for the team to take a step back. It's not like they had anyone who was in their 30s that was due for regression. It's not like anyone played so incredibly outside of their head that you didn't think that they could replicate anything that they did the year prior. And so it's just like, okay, this is a young team that's growing and finding their identity. There's no reason why they shouldn't take a step forward again. And so I thought top 5 is peace. I was like, that's the baseline, because there's no reason to look at this team and think that, Scotty or Pascal or Fred or OG or anyone or Gary Trent Jr. would take a step back. It just looked like all of those guys were due for another step forward. And unfortunately, it didn't play out that way.
Yeah. This is a team that for me, I had as a top 6 playoff lock. I felt as if coming in, they had the size, the tools, and again, the playoff experience of multiple veteran players on a roster to go far. And to the start of the season, I mean, the jump that we saw from Pascal Siakam, I mean, in those first 10 games, he was all NBA lock. He looked like a top 5 player to me based on the way he started playing basketball, specifically the performance against the Nets. They lost that game, but the effort you saw Pascal play in terms of the way he was controlling the pace. What did you think about Pascal's start to the season for the Raptors?
It was incredible. He came in saying that he wanted to be a top 5 player, and he very much looked like that. He was doing absolutely everything on that court. The Brooklyn game that you're talking about, he had like a 40-point triple-double, and then it was a back-to-back, and in Miami, absolutely dominated a Heat team that sent absolutely everyone on their roster at him to try and stop him specifically. It was like Pascal Siakam was taking the leap that pushed him from 3rd team All-NBA to solidifying himself in that 2nd and 1st team. And unfortunately, in Dallas, he goes down, and things start to really unravel from that point for the Toronto Raptors. Like, that is the turning point. If you look at the first, I think it was 7 games of the season. If you look at the first 7 games of the season where he's healthy, and granted, 7 games is such a small sample size, fair, but we're talking about a guy who was putting up 40-point triple doubles and doing everything across the board for this team that really does struggle in a lot of ways to create offense, and doing it with absolutely no spacing. The Raptors were not that bad to start the year off. Start to really take a toll towards the bottom starting from December. But so when Pascal goes down, I think that's a major turning point in the season. So when we're looking at the season as a whole, I don't think you can ignore him going down against the Dallas Mavericks somewhere between 7 to 10 games in the early parts of the season with a groin injury. And then for the next 10 games that he's out, the Raptors go 5-5. So treading water. They're treading water without their superstar there. They're treading water, and we're seeing, again, Scotty Barnes put on different hats. We're also seeing Gary Trent Jr. put on different hats, but we're also starting to see some seams come apart with the team. We're hearing things like Nick Nurse wants to bench one of Scotty Barnes, or Gary Trent Jr. ends up benching both of them. We're starting to see issues, and also somewhere around there, and it's not talked about enough, it was the Philadelphia 76ers game, which was also, we're talking 5-6 games into the season, so very early on. Fred VanVleet has a back injury, and I think goes 0 for 11 in that game. And from that game forward, he really struggled. He sat for the next 3 games after that point, came back, looked great for a couple of games, and then from that point forward, Fred VanVleet's shot absolutely abandoned him. When we're talking about, when we talk about the Raptors in 2022, a large part of why they were as successful as they were was Fred VanVleet's shot. When you have a team that really struggles without having pull-up shooters, you need your guy, your main point guard. Need him to be able to do that. Now, Gary Trent Jr.'s pull-up shot also, the efficiency went down incredibly on that. And so when both of your only 2 guys that can actually hit pull-up shots start to see that decline, it's pretty bad. But for Fred VanVleet, we're talking a 40% 3-point shooter on 10 attempts a game in 2022 to going down to like 35%. That is significant for a guy who takes 10 threes a game and is your primary guy on ball, so he's taking a ton of those as pull-up looks. And two, he was still the team's best catch and shoot guy, but not by as much as he was the year before. And so you're really starting to see the spacing for the team come down. And that started somewhere around that 6th game. He came back, he was down for 3 games. He came back, looked pretty good for the next 3 games, and then was rusty. Yeah. Honestly, for the entire season, you look at his 3-point shooting numbers, they're not good, and you see it. And he didn't really have a chance to rehab that because, yes, with Pascal gone, and then you have, OG and all these people missing time. Fred VanVleet is playing 40 minutes a night throughout all of that. There's really no time to rest and rehab at all. So we just saw him really struggle, and this team is bad if your point guard is bad because they already just can't run an offense.
They were 5-5 without Pascal Siakam even playing. And it just speaks to like the heart and the will of that team. Because again, I'm telling you right now, I saw multiple members of that Raptors team playing pickup basketball during the summer in the Rico Hines runs. And you just saw like the passion and the determination of the team. So for them to go 5-5 without Pascal, it's not like the lack of team effort was there, but things did fall apart during the season. I want you to like tell me what you think your biggest estimation of why the locker room was what it was after these points.
I think there's a couple of parts to that. And you're right. This is a team that had the Rico runs in the summer. This is a team that came in with the second most continuity, I think, of any team that wasn't the Miami Heat from the year before. So this is a team that, like, on paper, you're like, hey, these are guys that play really hard. To play a Nick Nurse style of defense, you have to play really hard. And I think that that's the biggest thing that took a toll on this team, where Nick Nurse was very rigid in the way that he coached this team. He's known, and I all credit to Nick Nurse. He brought this city a championship, and he did it by being this creative, out-of-the-box coach. At the same time, he's pretty rigid in the way that he goes about things. So a couple of things is he does not like playing. Here's Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, who's killing it in FIBA right now. Rondae Hollis-Jefferson and Stanley Johnson joined the Raptors the year after Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green leave. So you have Danny Green, Kawhi Leonard, two obviously defensive stalwarts. They leave, and you're bringing in Rondae Hollis-Jefferson and Stanley Johnson, who at this point are only in the league because of what they were doing defensively. So Stanley Johnson in particular. And Nick Nurse is like, yeah, they're not going to see any minutes on the court at all in the beginning, because not up to par defensively. They're not playing championship level defense. And that was what he said. And so Stanley Johnson, who is known specifically for that, had to ride the bench until he was playing what Nick Nurse deemed to be championship level defense. And so Nick Nurse is and all that to say, Nick Nurse is really hard on the type of players that he lets play. He's not going to let a lot of the young guys play. And that's been the biggest critique of him. He's not going to let a lot of them play. And he's also going to call them out in the media. Nick Nurse has no qualms about calling any player out in the media, letting you know, hey, Gary Trent Jr. is just not going to play because he's not been playing well. Like, that's just going to be it. He's coming off the bench for that in particular. And that seemed to rub a lot of players the wrong way. The players who were not getting minutes on the court seemed to rub them the wrong way. And then you have 3 players going into contract seasons that are being asked to play 40 plus minutes a night because Nick Nurse doesn't want to play the majority of the roster. And that took a toll on the players. Fred VanVleet, we're talking about being injured. OG Anunoby missed significant time being injured. Otto Porter Jr. got injured and never suited up for the Raptors the rest of the season. And like, I don't know any details behind that, but I'd be hard pressed to believe that he was happy with the amount of minutes Nick Nurse played him in the first 3 or 4 games before he had the injury. So you have all of these players being like, hey, we're going into contract years. You're running us into the ground. And then you got guys on the bench being like, you're not playing us at all. And I think that caused a lot of issues. And the biggest one is defensively. This is not a team that's just being asked to play 40 minutes and that's that. It's like, oh, that sucks, but like that's what guys were doing in like the 2000s. That's just sort of life. It's guys being asked to play 40 minutes and playing the most aggressive style of defense in the NBA.
Very difficult defense, right? Absolutely.
It is. It is defense without, so basically how the Raptors sort of play defense, it's the most aggressive style. That is what Nick Nurse does. And hey, he's had the personnel to do it, right? Like you have Kawhi Leonard and you have Marc Gasol. You have Kyle Lowry on that team and Danny Green on that team, Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby. You have all of these guys. And even still, this roster construction is really built with the idea of playing the most aggressive style of defense. That's why you have a bunch of power forwards that are just all length. The idea is, yeah, you don't have a center, but you have guys that can take away the middle and also rotate out to the perimeter and take that away as well. And that requires a ton of effort. And what we saw is Fred VanVleet, who could have been, second all defensive team the year before in 2022, who was playing just phenomenal defense for the Toronto Raptors. I think Zach Lowe maybe had him on his second team last year, not this past year, but 2022. Take a major step back. And I think part of that is the back injury, and part of that is the load that he had to take offensively. We saw Scotty do the same thing. And I, again, think that's part of Scotty not knowing his role, but as point of attack defenders, those two took a considerable step back. And if you have your two main point of attack defenders take a step back and you don't have any interior presence, you're just going to get just, and Pascal Siakam, the load that he took on the offensive end meant he took a step back defensively. And so you just have OG Anunoby. Gary Trent Jr., Gary Trent Jr. has this reputation of being a great defender. And I think he did well in terms of what Nick Nurse does well. One thing he does well is when he has specific personnel, he plays to their strengths, which is why when he has a team with a ton of length, this is the type of defense that he deploys. Just to give him some credit, because I think a lot of Raptors world does not do that right now, but I think he does sort of play to the strengths of his players. And with Gary Trent Jr., primary strength is Gary Trent Jr. is not gonna, guard someone face up and do a good job of that, but he gambles a ton. And you can have him gamble a ton when you've got Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby and Scotty Barnes and all that length right there behind you. You can allow him to do that stuff. And so we saw 2022 when this team is all bought in and they don't feel like they've been worn down by this defense and they're playing as a collective, and they, this hasn't sort of beaten them down quite yet, just to be completely honest. Trent Jr. is allowed to do that, and you've got guys to clean it up if mistakes are made because he gambled, and you need someone on the back line to clean that up. That was allowed. The year after, we saw less of it. We saw less of it from everybody. It wasn't the team playing cohesively defensively. They weren't playing a cohesive style of defense. And so if you actually look at the numbers, I think it was from around late November, a month into the season, when their defense just took a complete and utter nosedive. And in December, they maybe, I think, had the 24th ranked defense. Yep. And it didn't rebound until, if you look at the game specifically, and there's a reason why, Christian Koloko was playing. That's where they had the best defensive rating. Christian Koloko is a rookie. Christian Koloko is a second-round pick rookie, but he was at least the only 7-footer on the team. Even Precious Achiuwa, who plays, a nominal 5 for the Raptors, they needed, and they still look better with Precious than they did without. I think the beating was too much on Pascal Siakam and on Scotty Barnes to be playing the 5 defensively as often as they did, or an OG Anunoby, who also is tasked with guarding the best perimeter player on the team there as well. So when they actually had a center, their defense and their defensive numbers are night and day. I wish I can pull it up for you, but my computer is lagging for me right now. But it's night and day, and so it was very clear that they needed a center. That is what they needed this entire time. And as soon as they got Jakob Poeltl, their full-time center, the numbers looked very similar to as they did with Christian Koloko, because, hey, and Jakob is obviously a much better player than Christian Koloko, and they had a top 5 net rating for the starting 5 with Jakob Poeltl in there, because at the starting 5, Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes, and Jakob Poeltl is a damn good starting 5. It makes sense that they had a top 5 net rating in the entire league together, and it makes sense that a large part of that is off the backs of the defense. And so it just, you needed, and so I don't totally fault Nick Nurse for this. I think a large part of it is the roster that he had, and it was completely flawed, and the team just decided to take way too long to finally bring in Jakob Poeltl.
I love everything that you said, because for me coming in, that was what made it hard, because while I believed in this team, they didn't have that big. Like when this team won a championship, they had a dominant front court, but they also had POA guys both at the wings and at the point. I feel like going an entire season where, okay, Pascal is gonna share minutes at the 5 and like not really have like that true big presence behind him, I feel like that would be taxing, especially considering everything these players have to do on the offensive side of the basketball as well. And your point about Nick Nurse is so correct about the way that he runs these players down sometimes. Even last year when they made the playoffs, the amount of minutes these guys are playing on a night-to-night basis, it's not like they're just playing and they can like stand. No, they're being taxed like tremendously on the defensive end, and they're playing 40 minutes a night every single night to play basketball. And then sometimes if they voice this or whatever, at least, you know, in my mind, some of these players aren't getting consistent minutes as well. It's like, damn, I can play 35 minutes and then not play. Like, things change up. But specifically this year, getting Jakob Poeltl to me was another turning point for this team, because once they got Jakob, you're absolutely right, that defense perked up tremendously. Like right now, adding him, he added plus 4.2 points per possession to the offensive end as well. It's not just the defense. Jakob, as an individual player on the team, just provided a tremendous amount of value in terms of offensive rebounding and the screens that he could set as well. Like, it was a dramatic change for the team, for sure.
Yeah. Like I said, they had the 5th best net rating in the league if you're looking at their starting lineup with Jakob in there, and that's with guys like OG missing time. That's with guys like Fred VanVleet, you know, dealing with injuries throughout, and Pascal Siakam. So even despite that, and Pascal Siakam, when Jakob came in, his numbers started to dip considerably, and I think it was just trying to find what made sense for the team, and you do have to sort of figure that out offensively, and that's why they didn't end up playoff team. If you're looking at why they made the Jakob trade way too late in the season, something that people had been calling for the start of the season, and they and also like because they made it so late, yes, their defense was clicking, but they didn't find a way to really make that offense hum in the way where Pascal Siakam can also get his in the same, and Scottie Barnes as well, because Scottie Barnes, if you're looking at his numbers, and yes, his efficiency, if we're looking at part of the reason why the Raptors struggled in the second year, is his numbers might look the same. His numbers, I think, might even be identical, but the efficiency across the board went down. And where we really saw Scottie shine and where we really saw his strengths was when he was playing the 5, at least offensively, right? So when he was in the dunker spot, when he was setting hard screens, when he was finishing at the rim, like there's just a Scottie Barnes that plays really strong, and like he's the tallest, biggest man on the court, that is so incredibly dominant, and you take that away when you have in a Jakob Poeltl. So had they had more time to figure out how to make everyone fit together, including Pascal Siakam, because again, Pascal, Scottie, Jakob, I know we're not talking about next season just yet, but that's 3 guys who can't shoot at all, right? So we're really struggling with the spacing there, and so you needed that from OG Anunoby towards the second half of the season. If we want to talk about the reason why the Raptors were as good as they were, is because he was absolutely lights out, and so like he made a lot of that work. But you mentioned it, the offense looked much different with Jakob because Fred VanVleet, for all his faults as a guy who lost a lot of his shots, his pick and roll game with Jakob was superb, and that's a lot of the Raptors offense. And here's the thing, Fred VanVleet can't finish inside. Fred VanVleet doesn't have any floater, doesn't really have anything like inside the arc. It's just not there for Fred VanVleet. He doesn't have that. It's all above. And here's the thing, he wasn't knocking them down at the same rate, but guys are coming out to him at the same rate, because he's still a guy who's a career 40% shooter. And so you just had something with Jakob that right now, unfortunately, I just don't see them really having, because I don't think anyone trusts Dennis. Like, I don't think Dennis Schroeder, people are going under a ton and or they will go under a ton, and he's just not gonna make them pay. With Fred VanVleet, you couldn't really do that. And I think that gave the Raptors the spacing that they needed. So we even saw, despite his shot not being there, just having the reputation of being a Fred VanVleet and being able to burn you, because it is huge. And so we really saw things come together, and it's really frustrating. It's the most frustrating part of the Raptors season is in February, you saw the vision. You saw it come together. You're like, this makes sense. You have a center who is the backline of your defense, and you have a pick and roll partner for Fred VanVleet, because the Raptors are not a team that get offense very easily. We're talking about how much they have to move defensively. Part of that is because the bulk of their offense is either offensive rebound, so they need a big guy because it helps, and transition. So getting stops and running the other way. And so when their defense is not as good as it's been and their shots from outside are not falling, it hurts the offense. And so finding just easy offense, having a pick and roll partner, having a big who's a roller really helps smooth things out. And so you got to see this traditionally built Raptors team looked the way they could have looked all year and really saw how all of it made sense, which is why I was so optimistic heading into next season. And now I'm not, because you don't have Fred VanVleet, who I think is so important to what this team does.
When you have it centered like that, like you said, Jakob being able to screen and get offensive rebounds, it just adds a different dynamic to the team as a whole. And the level of defense, like, I have to highlight this too, OG Anunoby was in Defensive Player of the Year conversations before he got hurt. He was, because he was playing that level of pesky POA defense. The issue is they didn't have a strong back line behind him to keep that consistent for the entire year. And losing VanVleet is tough, I would say, overall for this team. It really makes me question what's the future of the franchise currently, with like the planning of what the core is. Like, a lot of people have talked about trading Pascal. Where are you with that?
Where I am in terms of like the direction of the team. So personally, I think losing Fred VanVleet matters a lot. And I think a lot of people who disagree with me, and it's fair, it's valid, I can see people's points. Look at Fred VanVleet of last season. And I am looking at Fred VanVleet of the season before. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe other people are. We don't know what he's going to look like. But to me, the perfect player who can fit alongside this Raptors team is Fred VanVleet from the 2021-2022 season. This is a guy who, as I mentioned, takes 10 threes a game and shoots 40%. And it's not like, oh, that's an outlier of a season. That's who Fred VanVleet has been. I mean, he won the Raptors a championship because he shot like, the Milwaukee Bucks fans still have nightmares about how well Fred VanVleet shot in that series. So that's just who Fred VanVleet is. He's a high volume, efficient 3-point shooter and has been for his entirety of his career almost, except for maybe his rookie season, and in the G League as well. So that's number one, is you're looking at the Fred VanVleet of the year before. So this is a guy who can play off ball. Now, that was an issue that the Raptors had at the beginning of the season, was Fred VanVleet didn't look very comfortable playing off ball, and you just sort of needed to put the ball in his hands. And when he has a pick and roll partner in Jakob Poeltl, it's just seamless to just let that happen. So he finally has a roller as a pick and roll partner. He can hopefully take his threes. And as I mentioned, he was one of the team's best defenders in 2021. You obviously have OG Anunoby, but Fred VanVleet was so incredibly elite. And I know people see his size, but again, the only way that the Raptors were able to have a starting lineup of both Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet together is because both of them are such tenacious defenders that you can have two guys that are 6 feet tall on a good day, but like, I don't know, 5'10",
watch the first 10 games of the season,
5'11".
what he was doing defensively was just phenomenal. It was great.
And you can pick like there's a number of games in the year before. He is that. I mean, the reason why he made this Raptors team, and there's lots of reasons why, but like his first preseason game that he ever played before he had an NBA contract, we're talking about an undrafted guy that had nothing, was locking Stephen Curry up. Like Steph was just like, he's back in the game again. And that continued to the Raptors winning a championship, right? Like you can't run a box and one. Here's what I'll say. Here's how good Fred VanVleet is defensively. He started over Danny Green in the finals because Nick Nurse was just like, gotta pull Danny Green and put in Fred VanVleet for his defense. Like that is a major sort of testament to the kind of player Fred VanVleet can be. So to me, it's just like losing him hurts. Here's the thing. I don't think he's worth $40 million. As much compliments as I'll give him, he's not worth $40 million. I'm going to be honest. Anything over $30 million would have had me a little queasy anyway. I thought the most the Raptors could do was 33, and that was going to make me feel really sick. But I was like, hey, got to do what you got to do. Cap's going up. Let's go. But yeah, once it gets to 40, I'm so happy for him. We're talking about an undrafted guy making max money in the NBA. That is insane. And so, congrats to him and his family. Not something that I would have wanted the Raptors to do, but also don't think the Raptors planned for this. So there's a lot of people who are like, well, what direction are the Raptors going to go in? And what are they looking to do? And it's told us that at the deadline. They've been telling us this entire time, but at the deadline, they did not make a trade for any of these guys. And they said at the deadline, their goal was to re-sign them. They said at the end of the season, goal is to re-sign them. They said it every step of the way what their plan was to do. And here's the thing, it didn't come down to them. It came down to Ime Udoka wanting Fred VanVleet over James Harden and offering him the money they had saved for him, right? And so at that point, it's not their decision to make, but their goal was to bring everybody back, and they were able to get back Gary Trent Jr., who we're talking about people having down years. This is a player who in December, if anybody said he was going to opt in, you would be called crazy and get laughed out of here. And he opted into his contract because of the down year that he had. And you also have Jakob Poeltl re-signing. And so you see the Raptors bringing everybody back, but they don't have a guy like Fred VanVleet. And that's not Dennis Schroeder, who's also eating up FIBA right now as well. He's a good player, and I'm excited to bring him on board. But the things that Fred VanVleet does well, that no other Raptor player does particularly well,
the spacing,
is
man,
going to be missed. It's predominantly the spacing, and it, like, for the Raptors to have not had a pick and roll, to have not had a roller in forever, finally lose a pick and roll ball handler, like, it's just like one goes, the other comes. And you know, I was looking at some of Dennis Schroeder's numbers, and honestly, I think Louis Zatzman had a piece on this, which was great. I hope it was Louis Zatzman. I'm pretty sure it was. But Dennis Schroeder's pick and roll numbers look, like, I think what a lot of people are sort of focusing in on is when he played with entirely shooters on the Lakers team, or even the German team, right? So we're looking at a completely different thing than what the Raptors can sort of put together for him. And I just don't know that I'm like gung-ho about it, but you know, you have a new coach in who wants to try a bunch of different offenses, and we'll see what the Raptors do, but they lost quite a bit because they lost the sort of duo that you have with Jakob Poeltl that was so potent, and you lose the spacing that matters so much. Having guards matters, and the Raptors just lost their best one.
I agree with you. Like, even though VanVleet had a down year, the impact he had by simply being on the floor with or without the ball in his hands, teams still respected him. Because remember, a year before this, he was all-star and he was shooting like 43%, and he was one of the best pull-up shooters in the NBA. And you finally get Jakob Poeltl, who, again, like, to me, that's a dramatic turning point in the season when a lot of people did not have the Raptors even making the play-in. And, you know, getting him turned the entire year around, and now you lose the one guy who provides so much spacing with him in that pick and roll combination, which is tough. But at the same time, I will say this, like, losing Nick Nurse and getting another head coach, now, like, the vibe just feels different. What do you think your feelings are on this new head coach, and how does he fit in with what the Raptors want to do?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. So the thing about Nick Nurse is kind of quiet quit on this team, or loudly quit on this team. You know, there was a press conference that happened in Philadelphia, which I don't think is a coincidence. I mean, allegedly, not a coincidence. Where he basically was just like, yeah, it's been 10 years that I've been here, you know, 5 years as an assistant, 5 years as a head coach, and 10 years is a good time to sort of look back. And everyone, allegedly people on the team, were just like, and they end up losing that game in a blowout. And it felt like, oh yeah, your coach is quitting on you, the players are registering it, and it's all bad here. And it just felt like the vibes could not be lower after that game. You can miss 18 free throws in a play-in game. So they could always get lower. But yeah, so I just think that, like, I think that Nick Nurse had a lot of people start to tune. Like, I think a lot of what Nick Nurse did grates on people after a while. I think he's a great head coach. I think it's a good acquisition for the Philadelphia 76ers. I'm excited to see what he can do. He's been the guy that's had the best luck, the best results against Joel Embiid, and now he gets to coach Joel Embiid, which is exciting. Right. You know, he held Joel Embiid to 0 points in a game. Like, he's the only person who can say.
Yeah.
Hey, neither will I. Joel Embiid averages the least amount of points against the Toronto Raptors, specifically because of what Nick Nurse can do. And this is even post Marc Gasol. You had Aaron Baines shutting down Nick Nurse right before Aaron Baines left the league. So Nick Nurse has had, you know, he's a great coach for a lot of reasons. He's incredibly creative in what he does. But again, it just felt like, and we talked about it, whether it be the minutes, whether it be calling players out to the media, whether it be kind of quitting on your team in the city that you're now working for, whether it be any of those things, it just felt like the vibes could not have been lower. There was, for a team that's really prided itself on culture and stability and continuity, even like Dwayne Casey, for example, was not Masai Ujiri's hire. He wasn't Masai Ujiri's guy, but Masai Ujiri let him stay here until it was a breaking point. Until it was like, okay, you cannot get swept as the higher seed 3 times out of 4 years. Like, it took doing that. And this is not his hire, but he just prides himself so much on having that continuity and having that stability in a structure, you know, that he let it go that long with Dwayne Casey. And Nick Nurse could not last that long. And Nick Nurse is his hire. And Nick Nurse is a guy who he sort of envisioned this team, he built this team with, like, you know, it seemed very collaborative with the type of guys that Nick Nurse likes to play and the type of guys that Masai Ujiri likes to draft. It felt like there was cohesion in that front office and coaching staff, and there clearly wasn't. And I think that it was just time to part. And the vibes could not have been worse, where you're just having every conversation in the offseason being about a culture change and a culture reset for a team that's prided itself on having championship culture and winning. You know, that after the championship season, they won more games than the year before. They had the second best record in the league outside of the Milwaukee Bucks, and were looking really, really great and looking like things could really happen for them until the, you know, bubble happened. And I think the bubble impacted the Raptors more than it impacted any other team, because a lot of our international players could not go to America and had to stay in Canada, where we had the toughest restrictions. Pascal Siakam didn't touch a basketball for 4 months. Neither
couldn't leave anywhere, right?
Neither could they couldn't leave their apartment. They could not go to the gym in the Raptors training facility. They could not go to the gym in their condos that they all live in. They had to be confined to, you know, whatever 1,000 square feet that they have in their condos. And could not do anything. You can't dribble a basketball because there are people who live underneath you. So we had Serge Ibaka and Pascal Siakam and all these guys really complain about the fact that they just could not do anything throughout that. And then the bubble comes around and Pascal's obviously injured and things really falter and you lose in Game 7 to the Boston Celtics. But I think that Raptors team really did believe. I hated it. Just because, you know, Kyle Lowry got ejected in the final seconds and complimented Fred VanVleet quite a bit, but my goodness.
But that OG shot, that OG shot was crazy.
Beautiful. But it goes down to Game 7. It goes down to the final possession of Game 7, and your best player and point guard is on the bench because he just got ejected off of, you know, some bogus calls late in the fourth. But maybe I'm biased. But yeah, so I think the Raptors really looked at that and said, hey, a lot of people counted us out with Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green leaving, but we are, like, if you look at, you know, our advanced stats, if you're looking at the record, if you're looking at what we've been doing, it's actually been pretty good. And it's only until Pascal Siakam goes down with a groin injury that things really start to falter. And so they really believed in this championship DNA that they had. But they lost that, clearly. You have everyone from the team except for Pascal Siakam gone. OG Anunoby, of course, was on the team, but he was not a part of the playoff run because of an appendicitis. So everyone is gone, including your coach. And so the Raptors are really looking for a culture reset and for a change. And I'm all for it because I think it's necessary. And, you know, if Nick Nurse is the one thing sort of holding you back and tying you to that, it's fine to sort of cut your ties there, let him move on. He wants to be on a team that wants to contend, and he's not going to play any of your young guys. And if you're really starting that new phase, you need to be able to play those guys, and that's not something that he's been willing to do. And so now you have a new guy come in who is also creative and also outside of the box, and also didn't have a traditional route towards the NBA. And it seems to be more positive, but also, who am I to say that? Because last year I thought the vibes were positive when the whole team was doing Rico runs.
Yeah, I'm not mad at you at all, though, because again, like, I felt that Nick Nurse was starting to weigh on the team a lot more, because again, like, the minutes and also the interviews that I would watch where he's just outwardly saying the truth, I'm sorry, most coaches in the NBA will not be like, you know, up front. He'll literally tell you why this player is not playing, how bad he's been. Like, he will say that. And I think that both of those things weigh on you, especially after like the COVID season and all this other stuff. Like, that stuff does pile up on the team. So I feel like
these guys were in contract years. Sorry to interrupt, but these guys were in contract years.
contract years where their future in the NBA can be impacted severely by the roles they're playing for Nick Nurse. So it makes sense why a lot of the team was kind of upset and he was losing that locker room. So I do feel like by losing him, you are at least saying, okay, new direction, new voice, let's reset our culture, let's do things in a different way, and maybe that changes a lot of things for this team moving forward, because continuity matters, right? Like, we just saw Denver win their title after years and years of just saying, nope, same coach, we're going to build this up and find ways to change. So pivoting now for the Raptors, in my opinion, makes a lot of sense. My just processing on what this Raptors team exactly can be is, at the very least, you lose Van Fleet, but they did draft a guy who's known for shooting. Grady Dick, I mean, while obviously he's not going to be as prolific as a ball handler, at least day one, you're getting spacing to somewhat fit from day one. What are your thoughts on the draft picks this year for the Raptors?
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I was excited about getting Grady Dick here. I honestly would have been open to anybody. It's just he's been a lot of fun and really embraced the city, which I think people really love right away. But yeah, you needed spacing, so getting in Grady Dick, and then you also have Marquise Noel, who kind of sort of fits in your Fred VanVleet mold in that he is this undersized, undrafted guy coming in, but he's, there's all this talk about him sort of fitting into the Fred VanVleet mold. I want to say Fred VanVleet's 6 feet tall. Marquise Noel is 5'8". There's still a significant difference in terms of size there as well. But you have guys that are really sort of buying into this culture and are really sort of can't, like, this sounds so ridiculous because it's like, okay, we're talking about basketball, what do vibes have to do with anything? But when you have this gray cloud over your team and it seems like no one wants to be here, no one is happy with each other, all of that stuff is weighing on everybody all season long. You hear reports about arguments and fights and this and that, and one side is this and there's like two sides. There's the vets and the young guys, and they don't seem to get along, and then you have the coaching staff exacerbating it. That's not how you pronounce that word. But you just have it's just like it just felt awful, and you just have these young kids come in that are excited about it, and everyone's excited for them, and it changes things. But also having his spacing matters. Like having Otto Porter back, hopefully for this season, as he opted into his contract, so he's back in. Hopefully that spacing helps things. Hopefully the Dennis Schroeder acquisition in the offseason helps things as well. And so you're hoping that a lot of these guys can come in. I don't know that they can replace a one Fred VanVleet, but hopefully with just sort of mixing in and getting everybody to work, you don't really miss it. And also, who's to say that Fred VanVleet is 2021 self and not the 2022 self? Who knows? Yeah,
I think that for this team, again, this is more so a season where they're just trying to change things around, get a brand new voice in, work his system. Players can get, acclimated to a new way of doing things. And I still think that Grady Dick still fits into, we're going to have size and length at every position, because the Raptors team, in terms of how they develop players and get guys to buy in for years and years, they've been at the top of the league in doing that. So imagining him, sure, he's known for shooting, but with his length and his size, there's other things he can do to impact, winning on the basketball court. This, to me, is a year of figuring those things out and having a bunch of success. But for you, as a person that, watches all the games and you really cover the team on a day-to-day, what are your expectations for 2024?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think to what you said, in terms of a team that develops their young guys, that's something that the Raptors have not done the last few years, right? And they've had higher picks, so there's no reason why they wouldn't have, Fred VanVleet, undrafted, we talked about it a ton. Pascal Siakam, 27th pick. OG Anunoby, 23rd, I believe. A lot of the guys that they have developed, whether through the G League, Norman Powell, second round pick, or through, OG Anunoby didn't go to the G League as the one sort of standout from there, happened with Jamal Layla. And as a Warriors fan, you're familiar with him. He joined the Warriors crew because, hey, you needed the young guys developed. You had, at the time Wiseman, but also Kuminga and Moody, and you need these guys developed. And so he went over there because the Warriors were prioritizing that. And he's finally back with the Raptors. And I've never seen people celebrate an assistant coach this much. I've never seen an entire fan base get excited at an assistant coach coming back. But I think it just sort of showed a prioritization of young guys and development again, which is something that had been the Raptors' calling card and just wasn't in the last few years. You know, you didn't see that with Delano Banton. You didn't see that with Justin Champagnie or any of the young guys, Malachi Flynn. You didn't see that with any of the young guys on the team in recent years, and that's something that the Raptors have just ignored. And so having Jamal Layla come back, I think really sort of signals that. And to your point about like, is this season just seeing what you have? I think a lot of what this season depends on where Scottie Barnes is in his growth and his trajectory. Year 3 is a big year for a lot of these guys. Year 3 is Pascal Siakam being most improved player. Year 3 is Pascal Siakam going from being a bench guy to being the second leading scorer on a championship team, right? I'm not saying that he's going to make that kind of a leap. He also was not as, he's much better than Pascal Siakam was in year 2. But year 3 matters a lot. And I think if this Raptors team, I think they have really high beliefs and high hopes in Scottie Barnes. And a lot of what we'll see with it, does Pascal say? Do you trade Pascal? What do you do with OG? What's the timeline of this team?
It's
a lot of that
Scottie Barnes, right?
Depends on what Scottie Barnes is, because if Scottie Barnes is him right now, if Scottie Barnes takes a year 3 leap like a lot of the stars do in the league, right? Why wouldn't you want to pair him with Pascal? Like, why wouldn't you want to pair him with as much talent as you can have right now? And if he doesn't, then like, you give up on Pascal Siakam this early, or do you try to do you say, hey, maybe we build around Pascal and maybe we continue to do, there's so many different ways that this team can look, but I think a large part of it last year, I would have said, Scottie Barnes' growth, cherry on top. We know that this team could be good without him because you have Fred, you have OG, you have Pascal. It looked like Scottie Barnes was the cherry on top, and this year Scottie Barnes is the main course. Depends on his growth, and that will tell you what to make of OG Anunoby and what to make of Pascal Siakam and Jakob Poeltl and everybody else. But this team also doesn't have their pick next year. They don't have their pick unless it's, falls in the top 6. So they're going to try to win because they have no incentive to lose unless they're, the worst team ever. And then still you can be Detroit, the worst team ever, and land with a 5th pick, which is a little too close for comfort, right? So I do think that the Raptors' plan is to win next season. They've said that, but how much really depends on the growth of Scottie Barnes. And I will say, know that the front office really does believe in him taking that next step and making that leap. It just depends on how much that is and what that looks like, and how the other guys sort of fit around that. If you can make a Scottie Barnes, Pascal Siakam team work, and I think there are ways you can. A lot of it is sort of you don't have to totally stagger them, but if you have say you tie Gary Trent Jr. to Pascal Siakam because Gary Trent Jr.'s numbers with Pascal are superb and without Pascal are not good, and then you have Gary Trent Jr. and OG Anunoby, who I think Scottie Barnes, the majority of assists go to an OG Anunoby. If you can sort of pair them together so you always have shooting and you always have playmaking together, and then you can fit in whatever else around it, you kind of have the nucleus to what a good 44, 48 minutes can look like. So I do think a lot of what this Raptors team looks like next year really entirely depends on Scottie Barnes and whether people believe he'll make that jump or he won't. And that sort of shakes out how this team looks.
I like your points, man. For me, Scottie Barnes, his growth this year, I agree with you. It's very important because if he's good, if he takes that year 3 leap, which again, we've seen many stars in year 3 do it. And not to say that if he doesn't, he still can be good, because I have a 5-year thing. Like players sometimes are late bloomers, so cool. But if he's able to take that year 3 leap, what we're talking about with the Raptors significantly changes, because the number one name outside him that comes to mind for me is Pascal Siakam. Because last year, after seeing what he did, had he not got hurt, he would have been like a high tier all NBA caliber player in my eyes. That also spells trouble for the Raptors from this perspective. Because if he makes all NBA, now the extension where he's making the Supermax, where he's making a ton of money, now the team has to make a significant decision between, do we give him the money? Do we let him walk? Do we trade him? And a lot of that, as you said, really hangs on, is this team going to be a good team? Are we going to make the playoffs? If they're that caliber of team, I'm confident Pascal will be playing at a high level, and I'm confident that Scottie Barnes will also be doing the same. So it's going to be a very interesting season for sure, Iman.
Oh, yeah, no, I completely agree. And I will say they brought in Pascal's best friend in Jakob Poeltl, right? Like, that's a guy that Pascal has been clamoring to get back on this team. That
Loves
is his
that
best
dude.
friend in the league. Right, they're the duos that had to split up because, team had to win a championship with Kawhi Leonard. Thank you for thank you for helping us with that, Jakob Poeltl. But, yeah, so I think that the team sort of makes that decision and makes that move and tries to sign him long-term because they want to make Pascal happy. I think they recognize that, like, yeah, there's always a Jaylen Brown threat where he makes All-NBA, and now you're stuck having to pay him. I will say I believe those conversations are already being had right now. I know the Raptors are like, hey, gotta be good. I wonder if like he makes like if he makes third team, if they still give it to him, or if like you have to prove it. And I know he's ready to he's ready and he can leave at any point if they don't give it to him, if he does sort of make a third team. But I feel like the Raptors are going to be like, prove that the first 7 games of the season or the first 10 games of the season last year wasn't just a small sample. Prove that you can do this on a nightly basis. And so Pascal has a lot to prove as well. But Scottie Barnes is the real main focal point. And I think your point
100%.
exactly. If he doesn't do it in year 3, doesn't mean that he won't ever do it. It just means that he didn't do it in year 3, which is like, okay, he's still a young guy. He's 21, 22 years old. Like he still has additional years of growth. I think we can have this conversation in year 4, year 5, like where we're talking when his rookie contract is over and we're talking about what that next contract looks like, then we can sort of assess where he's at. But still in year 3, I think that but another thing that I think is so important about having this Scottie Barnes conversation is there's so much talk last year about will the Raptors trade Scottie Barnes for Kevin Durant. And I want to be clear, would have never just been Kevin Durant. They wanted Gary Trent Jr. and OG Anunoby. So now you a team that has
him straight up, right?
Because you need the money to work, and so it would have been OG Anunoby and Gary Trent Jr. So now a team that has 6 roster guys are going to trade 3 of them for 1 guy. I don't think that that was ever really in the cards for the Raptors, but still Scottie Barnes was the focal point of that trade. And this year you've had people being like, hey, could you trade Scottie Barnes for Damian Lillard? I don't know if those conversations have happened or if there's any sort of legs to that rumor. But next year, if he does not take the leap, I don't think you're going to hear Scottie Barnes' name being the focal point of a superstar trade. I don't think that happens in year 3 for guys if they've not taken that kind of a leap. And if he has taken that leap, why would the Raptors trade him, right? So you're kind of in that sort of situation, unless it's for Kevin Durant, who's he'll be 38 then. No, so I do think that the conversation here about Scottie Barnes matters so much, because even if you're looking at if Pascal is all NBA, could you put that superstar next to him? Well, Scottie Barnes no longer becomes that enticing trade chip to a bunch of other teams if in year 3 he has not made that growth, because hey, a year after that second contract's coming up, and if teams don't feel like they have that with him, so it changes. But I think the Raptors are really high on Scottie Barnes, so I'm really excited to see what he can do and what he can be this year, and I think that changes the conversation on Pascal. And another guy we haven't really mentioned, OG Anunoby, who's also an unrestricted free agent, and we've heard a lot of rumors at the very least that he wants a bigger role, especially on the offensive end, for a guy who does everything for this team defensively. I think we'll see a lot of that this year, just because you're a guy that has the second highest usage on the team is gone. But yeah, that's another sort of chip, because it's like, does OG want to play alongside him if this team doesn't look to be going and taking that next step? Because OG is going to be 20, he just turned 26, so he's also entering that sort of prime stage of his career, so he may want to move if it doesn't look like the Raptors are actually advancing forward. So they really risk losing absolutely everyone for nothing.
It's crazy thinking about it, because it's like there are so many good players on the Raptors that the future of the NBA can be impacted if Pascal says, I'm not going to re-sign, I go here or there, or if they just stay together, get good, and just, contribute more and more as the years go. Raptors basketball next year is going to be very intriguing. I promise you, Iman, I will be watching a lot more Raptors game this year. This project I've been doing where I'm basically going through all 30 teams was really to check, okay, how much do I know about each team? Where are they? How have they been? And what is coming next? And I learned a lot from this conversation with you on the Raptors. I have a lot of things that I'm writing down. I'm going to be penciling in Scottie Barnes' pull-up shooting, his perimeter defense this year. All of these things fascinate me, because again, like you said, it impacts so much for the Raptors if Scottie Barnes is that player, because at that size, if he can truly develop those point guard skills confidently, you're talking about length and size at every position, which how did the Raptors win a championship? in some capacity, they had length and size at every position. Even at guard, they still had guys who could contribute positively to the defensive end. So size and skill for the Raptors is the future.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're entirely right. You're entirely right. I mean, we had Kyle Lowry guarding JJ Redick. Like, and that's just, I'm thinking of the Sixers series because we were just talking about them. So, not size, you have a size disadvantage there, but you had a size advantage there in the way that, like, JJ Redick couldn't move him. So, size in other ways, let's say. Yeah, no, I think that's a really cool project. I love the idea of going back and looking at teams and seeing where they are. And I will say, don't marry yourself to the idea of watching a lot of Raptor games. There are very many ways I think that this could crash and burn. I think that there are lots of different ways that can happen. So yeah, I'm interested in seeing where this team is because everyone's wondering their trajectory or where they go, and I don't think they know.
Yeah, that's something that is 100% up in the air. I would at the very least have a spreadsheet for all 30 teams where I'm going to track how many games I watch. I can guarantee this. At the very least, I'm watching 25 games. At the very least.
Do you hate, like, I do it because I do hate myself and I subject myself to Raptor games. Like, here's the thing. It could be very special. It could really be. Hopefully, OG Anunoby takes that next step, and Gary Trent Jr., Gary Trent Jr. had to opt into his contract because
he didn't have the year he wanted.
For him.
Right.
It wasn't out there for him. That next contract was not out there for him. And I think a large part of that is Gary Trent Jr. has very many major holes in his game that he pull-up shooting, we know that he can do. Catch and shoot guy, we know that he can do. But what can you do when that shot is not falling? And towards the end of the season, we saw that shot not falling. And Gary Trent Jr. really have anything else in his arsenal. He's not a particularly good playmaker. He's not a particularly good finisher. He's not a good cutter. He doesn't do any of the other things that maybe you want your guard to be able to do. Not a good defender at all. I was going to say point of attack defender, but he's just, there are a lot of holes in his game. And I think this season, I really do believe that we're going to see Gary Trent Jr. because he recognizes it. I don't think he would have opted into his contract if there was something out there for him, and there wasn't, and there was supposed to be an extension for him. There were all these reports about an extension for him. It has not happened yet. The Raptors don't tend to overpay in extensions. That's not something they do, which is why they've let a lot of their guys go in free agency for nothing. So I think there's a lot riding on a lot of the players. Gary Trent Jr. will be an unrestricted free agent. So will Pascal. So will OG. And we're going into next season again with three of the main guys who just walk for nothing. So,
and like you said, like value players in the NBA, the guys that get paid are guys that no matter what, they can go 2 for 15 or whatever. They find a way to impact the game, sometimes without the basketball, sometimes with it, regardless of what they're shooting. On a night-to-night basis, can I rely on you? Can I depend on you? And again, like going back, if Scotty Barnes takes that leap, that is the type of player that can have a floor like that where, he might not be the best guy from 3 or from long 2, but he can impact the game in multiple other facets. In his rookie year, we saw how he could impact that. We saw the versatility that he provides you. And versatility is the key to not just players getting paid, but to teams having success. That's why the Raptors, in my mind, have the confidence in these players because they feel like the skills are there. They just have to figure out the system around them to maximize those skills, which they've done before in the past. So, yes. Do I hate myself? Maybe. I watch a lot of basketball, so I try to make room for.
There's just better teams. They're fun teams. Like, here's the thing. I think
there are fun teams this year.
I'll be positive on the Raptors. I'm here to talk Raptors. Let me. Yeah, the Raptors are gonna be great. Watch them because they're so fun, and yeah, they'll be awesome.
There are a lot of fun teams. I just feel like this project is inspiring me to take a deeper look at the teams that no one talks about. Sure.
Okay, that's fair. What is, outside of the Warriors, what is a high end for a team that you're watching a ton of games for, and what's a low end for a team that you're watching a ton of games for? Like, what's a number?
Okay, outside of the Warriors, I would say my most watched team is probably this is gonna be hilarious. Probably the Celtics. I watch a lot of Celtics games. The high end for that team is probably.
You project to next season? Like, you expect to watch a lot of Celtics team next season?
Next season? No. Next season is probably gonna be OKC. I think I'm gonna watch a lot of OKC games. Chet.
I woke up at 5:45 a.m. to watch Gilgeous-Alexander, Shea Gorgeous-Alexander. Lou Dort could not play today, but it was great.
He's great. Like, I love how Shea plays. I like Chet. That team is another undersized team that had no real big, but had a top 10 defense. They're young. They're coming up. Like, I like the potential for that team. So that is going to be a team. Another team that's underrated that I'm going to watch that will probably be terrible, like really bad, the Washington Wizards. Poole got traded.
I was like, I hope he doesn't say the Wizards.
Yeah, no. yeah. Listen, I hate myself, but listen, okay?
This is therapy.
Listen, I'm going to sell you on the Wizards, okay? They just drafted Bilal Coulibaly. Like, he's taller.
I'm excited. I wanted Bilal Coulibaly to be a Raptor, so I'm kind of hating on them a little bit for that. They also have way too many point guards. Give me somebody.
They have a lot of point guards, yes.
Give me back DeLon Wright. Give me me Tyus Jones. Give me one of the three. And so I'm hating on them a little bit because they're sort of all of the backup point guards that could be a starting point guard on the Raptors.
No, listen, I get it because their franchise is giving you a lot of reason to hate. Like, you choose to give Bradley Beal a $250 million contract with a no trade clause, and you don't trade him the year before Victor Wembanyama, who's a generational prospect, is being drafted. Like, it's been bad management, but we traded Jordan Poole there. I hated to let Poole go. I gotta see it through. I gotta see like how he progresses. I'm not giving up on him. Was he bad in the playoffs? Absolutely, but he had a bad year. He's also shown a lot of great value on this Warriors team when Steph was not playing for 2 seasons now. So I'm rooting for him. I will be watching at least, I can't say 25, at least 15. At least 15 for the Wizards. Because I know what I'm signing up for with the Wizards.
Okay, so 25 for the Raptors is on the high end then. So you we're deciding that you hate yourself. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. I made that executive decision that I do hate myself.
Who's the lowest? Just to upset a fan base. Who's on the low end?
To upset a fan base. Okay, I'm not gonna lie to you. The Hornets are gonna be a hard watch for me.
I don't think Hornets fans are watching the Hornets. It's fine.
I like LaMelo Ball a lot. It's just a rough roster in terms of like the team. The coach is kind of mid. Like I just don't feel like watching a whole lot of their games. I don't really see that much excitement from them, but I'll watch a couple.
Fair.
Yeah.
Valid. Fair. I'll watch a couple. They play the Raptors 4 times a year. I'll see those.
Hey, well, big shout out to Iman for agreeing to do this podcast with me. Great conversations overall. Again, she's a writer for Yahoo. All of her links and all that will be in the description and comment section below. Iman, do you have anything you got going on that you want to promote?
Yes, please check out Dishes and Dimes. We're coming out with a very special episode with a special guest, and check out Pros and Claws, geez Louise, where I'll be posting a lot of Raptors and just general NBA stuff from teams that I'm watching. Probably not a lot of Wizards and Hornets content, let me be for real, unless it's about Tyus Jones, DeLon Wright, or Monty Morris. That's everything for me.
Bet. Well, all of those links will be in the description below. If you made it this far, shout out to you. We are 1 hour and 5 minutes into the recording, but this is the Gifted Hoops podcast, and we are currently breaking down all 30 teams in the NBA. This podcast will continue on into the season as well. I wanted to do this project to give myself more consistency, to basically build more community, talk to more people, seeing how Raptors fans and Wizards fans feeling about the season before it starts. So again, big shout out to Iman for joining on this episode. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe on the YouTube side of things, and 5-star this podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We are building up consistency where there's literally no basketball outside of NBA basketball and also FIBA World Cup. So tap in. We'll catch you guys on the next episode of Get the Hoops podcast. Peace out, people.